Most of us like to believe we're open-minded. We tell ourselves that we judge people based on their actions, their values, and their character over time. And yet, within seconds of meeting someone for the first time, our brains have already formed a story about who they are, a story that feels surprisingly confident, even though it's built on almost no information at all. First impressions happen fast, quietly, and without our permission. And once they form, they shape how we see everything that follows. To understand why first impressions are so powerful, we need to look at what the brain is trying to do in those first moments of meeting someone new. At its core, the human brain is a prediction machine. It is constantly scanning the environment for patterns, cues, and signals that help it decide what to expect next. When you encounter a stranger, your brain doesn't have time to gather detailed evidence. Instead, it makes quick judgments based on limited information. Facial expressions, tone of voice, posture, clothing, and even subtle movements. These judgments aren't designed to be fair. They're designed to be fast. From an evolutionary perspective, speed mattered more than accuracy. Early humans didn't have the luxury of waiting for more data. A split-second decision about whether someone was friend or threat could mean survival or danger. That same mental shortcut still operates today, even though the stakes are rarely life or death. This is why first impressions feel automatic. They happen before conscious thought has time to intervene. By the time you realize you're forming an opinion, it's often already there. Once a first impression is formed, another psychological process takes over. Confirmation. The brain begins to selectively notice information that supports its initial judgment and quietly ignore information that contradicts it. This creates the illusion that your impression was accurate all along, even when it wasn't. If someone strikes you as confident, you notice their decisive actions and overlook their moments of hesitation. If someone feels awkward, you notice every pause and stumble while ignoring their competence. Over time, the impression hardens, not because it's correct, but because it's reinforced. What makes this especially important is that first impressions don't just affect how we see others. They affect how others see us and how they respond to us in return. When someone forms a positive impression of you, they're more likely to interpret your behavior generously. Mistakes are seen as accidents. Silence is seen as thoughtfulness. But when the first impression is negative, the same behaviors are interpreted harshly. Neutral actions become suspicious. Ambiguity becomes evidence. This creates a feedback loop. People treat you according to the story they've formed, and their behavior subtly shapes how you act in response. Over time, the initial impression can become self-fulfilling. There's also an emotional component to first impressions that often goes unnoticed. When your brain quickly categorizes someone, it reduces uncertainty. And reducing uncertainty feels comforting. The brain prefers a flawed explanation over no explanation at all. Ambiguity creates tension, so your mind resolves it as quickly as possible. This is why changing a first impression is so difficult. It requires the brain to reopen uncertainty, something it instinctively avoids. Letting go of an initial judgment means admitting, even briefly, that you might have been wrong. For the brain, that can feel unsettling. Understanding this doesn't mean first impressions are meaningless. They often contain real information. But it does mean they are incomplete. They are snapshots, not full portraits. And mistaking them for the whole picture leads to misunderstanding. The most powerful part of this psychology is not how we judge others, but how aware we are of being judged. Knowing that first impressions form quickly can create pressure to perform, to present a polished version of yourself, or to hide perceived flaws. This pressure can make interactions feel artificial and exhausting. Ironically, this self-consciousness can undermine the very impression you're trying to create. When you're overly focused on how you're being perceived, your attention shifts inward. You monitor yourself instead of connecting. And that tension is often felt by others, even if they can't explain why. So what does all of this mean in practice? It means that first impressions are powerful, but not permanent. They shape early interactions, but they don't define long-term relationships unless they're left unchallenged. Over time, consistent behavior can soften or even override initial judgments, especially when people are given enough exposure to see beyond their first assumptions. It also means that being aware of this process gives you a quiet advantage. When you understand that others are forming rapid judgments, you can approach social situations with more empathy, both toward yourself and toward them. You can recognize that awkwardness, nervousness, or missteps in early moments are not evidence of failure, but natural byproducts of uncertainty. And perhaps most importantly, it means you can learn to question your own impressions. Instead of assuming that your initial judgment is the truth, you can treat it as a hypothesis, something to test, not something to cling to. Because the goal isn't to stop forming first impressions. That's not possible. The goal is to hold them lightly. When you do, you give yourself the chance to see people more clearly and to be seen more clearly in return.